Hi everyone to Tech Safari and welcome to the Coding Safari Java and Android.
Hello everyone and welcome to Tech Safari. So in this video we'll get to know about variables. So let's open a default Xcode project and just let's basically discuss about what it's in the view controller, because that's the place where we're going to majorly discuss in this video. So we have a framework called a UI kit. A framework is just basically a collection of Swift files. So here we have something called a class. What is a class? A class is nothing but a Swift code snippet that contains all the code in it, and it could be initialized anywhere. So this class is called view controller, and it's of the kind UI view controller, and we use opening brackets and closed brackets to define the opening and the closing of a function or a class. So in this class, if you see, we have two functions here in this whole class. So we'll just get to know about each of them. So here we have a function called viewDidLoad, which is already present in the UI kit framework and in the UI view controller as well. So because we're adding code to it and running it, we need to override from its class, and it's of a type function. So we have the func keyword here. You'll get to know about this much in detail, and it's very useful. So totally we have here override func view did load, and again we have the opening parentheses and the closing parentheses. And in this we have something called super did load. It's just that we are getting access to all the variables defined in the view did load function. Next we have another function called did receive memory warning. That is just run when the app is becoming overused. We can just display a message to the user stating that please clear the data or else the app is going to crash. So yeah, that's much of the code present in the view controller. Nothing much. Next, in this video, as I said, we are going to know about variables. So what are variables? So variables are nothing but basic algebraic terms that do not have a particular value, and we can define them using name equals value. So here equals to is the assigning operator. We'll get to know more about assigning operators in the next video. So in Swift we have different types of variables such as ints, floats, doubles, longs, chars, booleans, strings. So that will be around 4 variable types, but don't get freaked out, as we don't need to remember uh, how to define each of them, because we'll get to know how to define them, then we'll come back to that. So in Swift we can define a variable in 2 ways. We can either use the let statement or the var statement. So a let statement is used when we want to define a variable that doesn't change its value, that is, it will be a constant value. And an example of a let statement could be number of days in a week. Yeah, that won't change in any part of the planet, or yeah, it will always be the same. That will be 7 days. So this would be a nice example for a variable that won't change. So next we have the var statement. A var statement is just quite the opposite. It is used to define a variable whose value won't be changed, or it is not a constant value. Suppose if I define it up there, then again I can change it in another part of the code. An example would be yeah, my name. Suppose here my name could be something Manas, but later throughout the game, suppose if I wanted to change my name, then I could change it later. But if I define it as a let variable, then I couldn't do that. So suppose if I wanted to change my name to say Lakshit, then I could do this when I define it as a var statement. Next, we'll just see how to define a variable. As I said, it's very easy to define variables in Swift. Just use the var or let statement and give it a variable name equals to and its value. That's it. Swift will automatically detect which kind of variable it is and set it accordingly. So let's try to define a variable starting. So we'll use that number of days in a week example. Okay, before that we define that, we'll just get to know what are each and what are those. So int, it's a number, or you could most probably call it an integer, and it stores small integers that is up to 32-bit. Like you could say around it could store up to 32 numbers, like that, something like that. uh, yeah, as I said, 32 bits, it's around 32 numbers or something like that. An example of int would be the number of days example. You could use that, or it could also be number of friends. I have 5 friends, so I could use 5 friends. So number of friends could be 5. And next we have something called floats. A float is a decimal value that is up to 32 bits. It can store up to 32-bit decimal. An example of that could be pi value, yeah, or my favorite float, yeah, and I could give it 3.5. And always at the end of a float we need to say f for it to recognize it as a float. Next we have something called longs, and longs are nothing but the same integer, but they can store up to 64 bits. That is a very very long integer. An example of a long could be yeah, I forgot to type their booleans, yeah. So an example of long could be say number of seconds in a 10 years, yeah. So next we have something called doubles. The relation between ints and longs is the same as floats and doubles. A double is a very long float. It can store up to 64 bits. And an example could be my favorite double, that's 0.12345678910 until infinity, or somewhat near 64 digits. Next we have something called chars. Chars are the most simple variable types in Swift. That is, they store a single character. Suppose I say example, my first letter in my first name, that will be equals to M because my name is Manas. So the first alphabet would be M, or I could even say first alphabet would be A. And not only that, it can store even numeric values, punctuations, symbols, and the most interesting things about car is they can even store emojis if you wanted to use it later in application. Next we'll get to know about booleans, as they are more simpler than strings. So boolean is nothing but your true and false statements. That is, they could only store two values, that is true or false. So an example could be, is app running? So presently it's running, so call it true. Or it could also take the value false. Usually humans like true, so you could even give it a value of true. So now we'll get to know what are strings. So strings are, as the name suggests, a group of characters strung together. And usually we use strings for defining names, text, and stuff. So let's see about an example for a string. Um, an example of a string could be, yeah, my name. That would be the best example for a string. Manas Ma. Yeah, that would be good for a string. And we could also include a number in a string. Yeah. So I'll change my variable type to my name and date of birth, that is Manas2004, and that all would be stored in the string. You could also use symbols such as /08, and even I could use the decimal here, 0.18. So let's start defining some of our variable types, and so that we could get know more about them. So I'm using the let command here. Name, let name equals Manas. I'm not going to change that presently, so I'm just going to define it as a let statement. So in the same way, you could define any of the following types. Here we did not explicitly use the word string as it was already defined. Now let's define var number of days in a week. That would be equal to 7. Next, let's define let is it May? Yeah, month. That is true since it's May. Next, let's say let what shall we define? Okay, say mm, let me think of a good example. Yeah, pi value. Yeah, pi value is a good example for float. So pi value, I'm just going to take the rough estimate value, that is 3.14. So I could say the set the pi value to 3.14. And next, let's print them. So print is a method which helps us to display anything in the logs. As you have seen in the previous video, we could just click on this button out here, that would bring up the logs. So anything we could print to the logs or display in the logs using the print method. So in the print method, in the middle of the brackets, you could just type anything that you would want it to display. So here I'll display the name. My name is Manas in the logs. So let's just run it. Yes, we'll just enable developer mode on this Mac. We'll enter a password and click on OK. And oh, oops, yeah, the best screen for my Mac is going to be iPhone 6, so we'll just run it on that. It's going to take some time for the simulator to boot up depending on your hardware. If you have more amount of RAM, it's going to take less time, and it even depends on your processor. It's going to take around 1 to 2 minutes. We could even resize it to our requirement, and we'll wait for it to load. And yeah, the first boot of the simulator is definitely going to take some time, so we'll just wait for it. We need to be very patient while developing any app in any language. It could be any language. We need to have patience first. Until then, we will do some modification. Yeah, as you can see here, because I used the let statement, it's going to give an error because the pi value is a let constant, so I cannot do that. It doesn't allow me to do that. But if I said let programming language equals Swift, and yeah, oh yeah, our simulator is up and running. It's just going to take 1 or 2 minutes. That's it. So we should have the variable name, that is my name is Manas, printed up here or displayed here. And yeah, as you can see here, presently we don't have a UI, so it's going to be blank, but here in the logs it's displaying my name is Manas. In the same way, you could display any variable in the logs. So yeah, that's much of this video. In the next video we'll see about many more variable types such as arrays and all that. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.